What's going on, everyone? It's Dan here. I've been in fitness for over 11 years and lost 30 pounds without giving up the Asian foods that I love. And over the past 3.5 years, I've helped over 250 Asian men do the exact same thing. And in this video, I'm actually going to walk you through the entire blueprint, if you will, of how I went through that 30-pound weight loss transformation and was able to keep the weight off, again, without any strict diets, without giving up Asian food, and doing it in a sustainable way. Because there's so much information out there, and I find that one of the number one problems that my clients come to me with is overwhelm, right? Like, there's so much. What do? I don't have time to figure all this out. I feel like I've tried everything under the sun that's restrictive, that people suggest for me to do, but it doesn't work, you know? And so I think there's a unique nuance with coming from an Asian cultural background where a lot of the diets that you see online, like keto, intermittent fasting, OMAD, 1 meal a day, right? You see Mediterranean diets, you see all these things, you try them, but they don't work for you. And it's not because you're broken, it's not because you're lazy, because you probably have actually given it a really good shot. But the biggest thing with sustainable weight loss that I've found to be true is that it has to be something long-term that you do from the start, right? I rarely find that doing something for the sake of just a weight loss journey and being very strict works long term. It really does in my experience, right? And so I'm going to walk you guys through the entire thing just from start to finish so that you can hopefully implement this yourselves and get results, get in better shape, and do it in a sustainable way. And so I want to break this down into a couple key pillars, right? You've got nutrition, you've got the exercise component, and you've got recovery and progress tracking, right? So those are the four things. And I'm kind of thinking through these as I'm talking to you guys through it. So forgive me if I'm kind of like, going all over the place, right? So very first thing that you have to nail down is the nutrition piece. Now, what I notice with a lot of guys is that they tend to gravitate towards workouts and cardio and exercise first as like a first line of defense to lose weight. And I don't know why that is. I think it's just because that's kind of how fitness culture is, right? They talk about moving and getting exercise in. But I've worked with countless guys who did all kinds of exercise. Like they were doing, HIIT classes and F45, and they were running and they were doing all kinds of stuff, but they were getting absolutely nowhere with their weight loss because their nutrition was not dialed in. They were eating out, super often, not really tracking anything. They didn't really know exactly what they were putting into their body. They were kind of just eating day by day and eating out of convenience, especially with, busy work schedules and meetings and all that stuff, right? And so it was just really hard for them to see any kind of progress, even though they felt like they were putting in all this work. So very first thing is nutrition, right? Now that has always been the biggest struggle for me is nutrition. Like I love to eat. And it definitely didn't come natural to me at all, And so for me, the very first step in really understanding nutrition to a deep level to where I could actually be in control of it is counting calories, like understanding calories, understanding what goes into food, macros, which you probably heard of, right? Now, I'm not going to overcomplicate this. I'm going to break it down super simple for you guys. Fundamentally, in order to eat the right amount of calories to either lose weight, maintain weight, or gain weight, you have to know roughly how much you need per day, like how many calories, how much energy you need per day to achieve that goal, right? Because everyone has a certain calorie number that they're going to be eating to accomplish that, right? So like if your goal is to stay the same weight, then you're going to be eating at what's called maintenance calories, meaning you eat the same amount of calories that your body burns, so you stay the same weight. If you're trying to gain weight, or if you accidentally gain weight, which is much more common, then your body burns this many calories to function, to stay alive, etc. But you eat this much, so there's a surplus. And so that surplus gets stored as body fat, right, for later use, So that's a surplus. But on the flip side, if your body burns this many calories, but you eat this much, then there's a deficit. And that deficit is what helps you lose weight, lose fat, etc. So you have to nail down that equation before anything else. Otherwise, it's just gonna be frustrating when you're not seeing results, right? You have to nail that down. And so the simplest way to do this is number one, you can use an online calorie calculator to do this. Like that's what I did when I got started. Is I didn't have AI tools or anything, right? So I just searched up calorie calculator. They all work. They all use pretty similar proven formulas. And so then it's going to prompt you to find your calorie goal based on your age, weight, height, and average activity level. Okay. So if you work out 3 times a week, then you would be considered like moderately active. If you're sitting all day at a desk for work and you also don't exercise, then you'd be considered sedentary, right? Sitting a lot. So your daily calorie goal is going to be heavily influenced not by your age, but by your activity level. I think there's also a big misconception out there that like your metabolism slows down a lot as you age. I haven't found that to be true at all, and that it actually doesn't slow down as much as you might expect. Most of the guys that we coach are in their mid 30s, early 40s, sometimes even late 40s, and they can get to a point where they can eat a lot of food and not gain weight just because of the way we've set up their program, right? So very first thing, you can go to a calorie calculator to find your daily calorie goal, your daily protein goal, your carb goal, your fat goal, right? But an easy back of napkin way to do that, if you don't want to go through that process, the way I do it, or the way I have done it, is you take your body weight in pounds and you multiply it by 14, and that's going to be roughly your maintenance daily calories. So the amount of calories you need to eat to stay the same weight, right? Again, influenced by activity level, but like rough averages, body weight times 14. And then from there, you subtract how much you want on a daily basis. You subtract or add how much you want on a daily basis if you want to gain weight versus lose weight, okay? Now, let's just say you just do the calorie calculator thing so you don't have to do any mental math, right? Great, so you found your calorie goal. So that becomes your input-output equation, right? So you have to get clear on that before you proceed. Then you've probably heard of macros, right? Protein, carbs, fats. Those are what I would call the 3 main building blocks of food that make up your daily calorie intake, right? So if you think of your calorie intake like this bottle of water here, within this bottle of water, your calorie intake, there's some amount of protein, some amount of carbs, and some amount of fat, right? Now, it can get very confusing when you're new to this, or when you're trying to count it and you're not sure how to do this, but the way I simplify it for my clients, and the way I did it when I was, going through my 30-pound weight loss transformation, is I just worried about 2 main things, which is how many calories am I eating per day and how much protein am I eating per day. If you get those 2 numbers right, then your carb intake, your fat intake, they will all fall into place however they fall, but you will be on track, right? And I think when I was getting started too, I didn't really understand fully, I didn't really fully appreciate the importance of protein until I started doing more research on it and realized how necessary it was, not just for the sake of like building muscle to look good, but just for longevity, for strength, and for satiety, right? Feeling full when you're when you're trying to lose weight. So that's why I would prioritize those 2 numbers, right? And side note, when you use that calorie calculator, it will give you your daily protein goal as well on top of your calorie goal. So like that will all be taken care of for you, right? So that's step 1. That's a baseline that I would recommend everyone start with. You have to understand what your calorie targets are and your protein targets are to get everything else right. Okay? So once you find that out, then the entire process becomes, how do I structure my diet in a way where I stay under my daily calorie goal and I meet or exceed my daily protein goal, right? So as an example, let's say that you find out that your calorie goal is 2,000 calories a day to lose weight, right? And let's say you also need to get 150 grams of protein per day. So now the entire game is like, how do I figure out what meals I'm going to eat to stay under 2,000 calories and get at least 150 grams of protein per day? Now you're in a deficit, right? So from there, it's like that's the sticking point for most guys. Once they calculate their targets, they're like, well, I don't know how I'm gonna, make this work. Like, how am I going to stay consistent with my meals? How am I going to meal prep, etc. Right? And so that's exactly what we help our clients with is figuring out the right strategy, because If you're someone who's super busy, or your schedule's getting busier, you have team meetings, work, you stay late at work sometimes, or you work night shifts as a healthcare worker, that can be very brutal, right? And it can be hard to stay consistent and stay on track with your nutrition. But there is a simple way to do this, and there are simple frameworks that you can repeat. Okay, so hopefully you're following so far, right? So we're still on the nutrition, because that's the biggest part. That's why I started with it. So you've got the calorie goal, you've got your daily protein goal. Now, how do you structure your meals? Because the number one issue with nutrition is consistency, what I have always recommended for my clients is to establish a basic rotation of meals that they enjoy. Because if you're trying to come up with what you're going to eat on the fly every single day and you're just winging it, you're not going to be able to stay consistent, right? So what I recommend for them is pick one breakfast, pick one lunch, maybe pick one breakfast, maybe 1 to 2 lunches, and then your dinner can be a little bit more flexible depending on what you got going on. If you got a family dinner, if you've got a client dinner, if you're eating out with your partner, whatever, like that's when it would typically be more flexible, right? So the reason I suggest having that breakfast and lunch be consistent is that basically means around 66% of your diet is the same. And when it's the same, it eliminates any variability, eliminates decision making, it just makes it automatic, right? And I find that a lot of our clients really, really like that. Yes, you do sacrifice a little bit of like variety during those meals, but you sacrifice variety for consistency, right? And then you can have your variety later if you go out for dinner or on the weekends when you want to, socialize, whatever, right? So that's the very first thing you have to do. And so the process now is structuring those meals in a way that will, again, help you meet your calorie goal and your protein goal, right? You might, before I get to that too, a lot of you guys might be sitting here saying like, well, I typically skip breakfast because I just rush out the door, I'm just busy. Yeah, most of our guys who come to us do the same thing, but one of the downsides of skipping breakfast is that, number one, you don't start your day off with protein, which means that you're much more likely to get hungry at around 10 a.m., 9 a.m. and start snacking because you don't have anything to keep you full, right? So like the snacking at the office, the chips, the break room snacks, like that all becomes a lot more appealing to you when you don't fill yourself up with a good meal in the morning. And number two, skipping breakfast makes it infinitely harder to hit your daily protein goal, which we know how important that is. Like that is 100% a non-negotiable, not just for fat loss and muscle building, but just for like overall health and for satiety, staying full. So if you don't hit your protein goal, that makes everything 10 times harder. So that's why I highly recommend for you guys and for my clients to do that too. And that was one of the biggest shifts for me. Like when I went from skipping breakfast to eating breakfast, it made the whole process so much easier because I wasn't experiencing all these like weird cravings, and for me, cravings and snacking was always the biggest issue for me. So you got to get that protein anchor at the breakfast. Now, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, right? You don't have to make a big feast or anything. You can just grab, it could be as simple as like a Greek yogurt bowl, 0% fat Greek yogurt with berries and a protein shake. Simple, right? Like it's very quick. It doesn't take any cooking, but it will keep you on the right track, right? Now, if you're gonna do that 3 main meals a day, where you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then lunch has to be something high protein as well. So all your meals now, you have to shift that thinking from, oh, I'm just gonna eat whatever's convenient, whatever's nearby, to I'm looking out for protein and calories, right? You have to shift your mindset to think in those terms so that you can actually stay on track. Okay, so when you're at lunch, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can pack something, you can meal prep something for the weeks ahead, or you can buy something outside, right? Now, since we're talking about Asian food and like, hey, how do you integrate that into the diet? What I would not recommend is just doing simple plain chicken breast and broccoli and rice. That's not, you're not gonna be able to keep that up for very long. Okay, so the way I think through this, and the way that I did this when I was losing that 30 pounds, was figuring out how to change the usual Asian dishes I ate to make them higher protein, lower calorie. So you don't eat something completely different. You know, let me just drink a little bit of water here. So the goal isn't to eat something completely different. It's just to shift and mold the current meals you eat to have higher protein, lower calorie. So for example, if you're eating like a huge fried rice dish for lunch, right? Maybe you're getting like a fried rice combo special at some takeout place. Okay, well, is there a better option we can get? Can we get steamed rice instead of fried rice? Can we get, maybe some lean chicken instead of just the fried rice? Or can we ask for extra veggies? Can we get a Diet Coke or a diet soda instead of a regular Coke, right? So it's this concept of swapping that's gonna make the biggest difference. And I found that is actually what is sustainable, is you don't cut things out, you swap them for lower calorie, higher protein alternatives. Now, a couple examples that I ran with when I was doing this is, kind of like a homemade Thai basil chicken, as an example, right? Pad Kra Pao. So, you can get the ground chicken, you season it however you want to, and then you have the rice, and then you have some veggies on the side, and boom, that becomes a simple lunch you can make. Or if you have like a teriyaki chicken bowl that you can make, homemade, or that you can get from outside, that could be another great option. Or you have a beef and broccoli and rice bowl that you make from home, right? So these are all, I'm just giving you ideas on how you can do this, but the simple framework with nutrition is, once you find your daily calorie and protein targets, you want to split that goal up across 3 meals and maybe 1 snack. 3 meals and 1 snack is the easiest formula to follow, right? So if your breakfast is always the same and your lunch, maybe you have 1 to 2 options per week that you rotate, great. Now that solves 66% of the nutrition piece for you, right? Now, what are some general guidelines you should follow per meal? Because I think a lot of people have trouble breaking it down. They're like, well, how much protein should I have per meal? And like, how do I structure this? So what I did was I would always aim to have my meals be 600 calories or less with at least 40 to 50 grams of protein per meal. That was my benchmark, because my daily calorie goal was like 2,000. So if you do the math, 600 times 3 per meal, that's 1,800 calories. And then I have like 200 calories left over for other snacks and dessert, right? Now, the reason you also want to make sure those meals have at least 40 to 50 grams of protein is because that's going to get you as close as possible to hitting your protein goal. Because most people, especially if you're Asian and you eat a lot of carby Asian food, it's hard to hit your protein if you're used to eating that way, right? It's like every time we bring on a client and they're like, and we give them their protein goal, they look at it and it's the same reaction every time. It's like, oh wow, that's a lot of protein. And most times they struggle to hit it for the first 2 to 4 weeks, because it's a different way of doing things, right? So you have to, like I said before, shift your mindset to prioritize that protein at every single meal. So that's why we focus on protein first, and then we build everything else around it. So simple framework is like fist-sized portion of protein, get you that 40, 50 grams. Then you have your rice here, right? Maybe 1 cup of rice per meal. And then you have your side of veggies for fiber. Chinese broccoli, kimchi, bok choy, you name it, right? So that's kind of how you're generally building your meals. This part definitely takes a little bit of trial and error, but once you find your combination of like 2 to 3 meals that you enjoy, it's so much easier from there, because all you have to do now is just repeat it, right? So 1 breakfast, 1 to 2 lunch options, and then for dinner, assuming you eat at home, it's going to be the same principles as lunch. But if you're eating out, then you're going to, again, look at the menus of the restaurant you're going to, and then find those options that are, again, under 600 calories for at least 40 grams of protein. So the principles apply, but the foods might change. And this is why I believe that learning how to track calories and learning how to understand macronutrients is the most sustainable way for Asians to lose weight, because it allows you to actually eat the foods you want. If you followed a meal plan, or you followed keto, or you followed intermittent fasting, it's just very restrictive, and it doesn't work when life happens, right? When you have to go out for dinners, or when you have to travel. Like, as soon as that happens, your routine's gonna break, you know? So macros allows you to be flexible. As long as you hit your daily calorie goal and your protein goal, however you do it, that's up to you. Now, I would recommend having your breakfast and lunch be the same so that you don't have to think about it, so you don't have to get overwhelmed and you don't struggle to stay consistent. But hypothetically, if you needed to change something around, you definitely could. Okay? So that's like the overall gist of nutrition. That's how I did it. Is I first learned how to start tracking my food. Well, first I learned, like, okay, what's my daily calorie goal and my protein goal? Like, what actually is it? Because most people don't even get clear on that part. So once you figure that out, then it's okay, well, how am I going to structure my meals to hit that? So I would say 3 meals, 1 snack is how you're gonna do it every day, as consistently as you possibly can, right? Now, the last part of this is the tracking of the food. This is also where most guys get tripped up, because they feel like it takes too much time, or it's too tedious, or they don't have time to do it. Most times, that's just because you're doing it wrong. Okay, food tracking should not take more than a couple minutes of your day to do successfully. Now, but the huge benefit of doing this is once you start tracking your food, you start putting it in an app like MyFitnessPal or any sort of food tracking software, you start to really understand what you're putting into your body. You start to realize where all of these little things you're eating are coming from and how many calories are actually in those things. And it's a shocker, because you realize that you've been eating more calories than you expected, because the foods you were eating were just very calorie dense. They weren't necessarily filling you up, but they were very calorie dense, right? But then once you start eating that higher protein, lower calorie diet, you're gonna get full a lot faster. You're gonna actually start having trouble finishing your food. And then that's what you want, because then you can eat more food and stay full and also lose body fat at the same time. Win-win, right? So when you're tracking your food, it again, this part takes a little bit of trial and error. You start tracking, you start weighing out, the ingredients that you're putting in your food by grams, according to the brand names, and you try to log it as accurately as you can, to really see what you're doing, So that's how I would definitely recommend learning how to track. And there's tons of tutorials on how to track food accurately. But I would pair the idea of macros, tracking, and Asian food together to create the system, what I call the cultural fat loss system that we've helped our clients with. And that's where the magic is, right there, is learning how to strike that balance, right? And so once you nail this nutrition part down, everything else gets easier. I'm gonna walk you guys through everything, but this is the biggest part that that most guys trip up on. So once you nail this, it's a lot easier from here. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's kind of like part one of this entire thing, right? Now part two is exercise. Okay, so when I reflect back on like when I started trying to lose weight, the biggest breakthrough I had that actually got me unstuck was taking my food tracking more seriously and really brainstorming how to like fit Asian foods within that so that I didn't feel restricted. And once I did that, I never really felt like I was eating something strict at all. It just felt pretty normal to me. But I just kept seeing my body weight drop every single week because I'd set up the right macros and the right numbers, Now, for the specific goal of fat loss, nutrition is the most important. That being said, you also do need to exercise in a way that helps you maintain and build muscle mass. Otherwise, the weight you lose is going to be a lot more muscle than it is body fat. So this is also a part where people go wrong, is they might be eating right, but then they do mostly cardio based activities like running, F45, HIIT classes, Orange Theory. They do all these like workouts that help them break a sweat, but it's not really resistance training. It's not really strength training. It's not really weightlifting. And so they end up just becoming a smaller version of themselves because they lose a ton of muscle, but they don't lose all the body fat. And so you end up in the situation where you weigh less, but your belly fat, your love handles, is still there, right? And that's because you don't have a proper strength training routine in place. So all these pieces work together as a system. Nutrition is the biggest part, but you also need the exercise part. Now, the way I was fortunate to get exposed to lifting weights very early on in my life. And I've been doing it for the past, 11 years now. But the core exercise methodology that we give to our clients who are trying to specifically lose body fat is 3 days a week of strength training. 3 days a week of strength training and walking. That's pretty much it. Like, we rarely recommend running or any sort of hit cardio, anything crazy like that, because that's not what actually moves the needle, right? Because weightlifting is what's required to stimulate muscle growth and break down the muscle tissue, and then you replenish that muscle tissue and help it build back stronger by eating the right nutrition, like with the right calories, the right protein, etc. But that also means that you don't need to necessarily spend a ton of time in the gym. Most of our clients get really, really great results just working out 3 days a week, especially if you haven't done it a lot before. Working out 3 days a week in the gym for 45 minutes is a really, really great start. Like, you could see really great progress doing that. But you just need a good kind of routine to follow, right? And I don't have time necessarily to go through all of this in the entire video, but you want to find like a good 3 day routine that is purely based on strength training, right? So when I was doing it, when I was losing weight, and this is the workout split I've been running for a super long time as well, is I would do a 3 day upper body, lower body, full body day split. So that's 3 days, upper, lower, full. The reason I would do upper, lower, full is because by doing upper, lower, full, you can work each muscle group in your body twice a week, which is based on the latest research, the optimal way to do it so that you can stimulate more growth. But it's pretty efficient, right? It's only 3 days, and it's very flexible. It's very easy to move around depending on how your schedule is. If you have work run late one day, you're not going to completely throw off your routine because you can move one day to the next, and you can still have some breathing room in your schedule. So that's why I think it works so well for a lot of busy Asian guys and just people with busy schedules in general. So run that. That's where I would start. And I would challenge you to include maybe 5 exercises per workout. So 3 days a week, upper, lower, full, 5 exercises per workout. And the workout should take no longer than 45 to 60 minutes tops. I would say 45 minutes is really the sweet spot there. You don't need as much as you might expect, right? The bulk of, if you train hard, if you push hard, if you lift heavy weights and you really challenge yourself, the other 80% of the work is going to come from how you recover, which we'll talk about next, and the nutrition that you're putting into your body, right? Now, with the weightlifting side taken care of, which helps you maintain and build muscle, assuming you have the right nutrition in place, then the other part of this is how active are you, right? One of the the easiest ways to help with the fat loss process in a not so intensive way is to just walk. Is to just increase the amount of steps you take on a daily basis. I think the reason that a lot of people struggle to also stay consistent with exercise is because they're trying to do too much at once. They're trying to run, they're trying to do HIIT classes, they're trying to do all these things, when all you really need to do is just figure out how can I increase my activity level on a daily basis to help me burn extra calories. But the way I do it has to be repeatable and has to be something I actually reasonably enjoy, right? And I find that for most people, that methodology is walking. It's just getting more steps. You could walk after your meals. You could walk a little bit during your lunch break. You could take a quick stroll while you're taking calls on the phone. You could get if you work from home, you can get a walking pad, right? And you can do your work while you're slowly walking on that pad to get extra steps in. You could take a walk in the morning when you wake up before you go to work, get some sunlight in your eyes. These are all different ways you can do this, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could take the stairs instead of taking the elevator if you go to the office, right? So based on those suggestions, I want you to start thinking of ways you can increase your step count. But I want you to do it without having to do any sort of hard cardio if you don't want to, right? So the getting those steps in will increase the amount of calories you burn, which means that you can eat more food and still lose weight. And just focusing on getting more steps in by walking also won't spike your appetite, so that you don't end up like running and working so hard and then craving food and then eating all your progress away, right? I think that's also a huge part where people mess up, because they work so hard in the gym, they do all kinds of workouts, but then they get hungry and then they overeat, and then you're back to square one. It's way easier to not eat 200 calories than it is to burn off 200 calories from exercise. So you might as well just not eat it, right? So that's pretty much the exercise portion. It's very simple. It's just 3 days a week in the gym, and regardless of whether it's a gym day or not, your goal is to hit anywhere from 8 to 12,000 steps a day. For most guys, I set their target at 10,000 a day, but I usually have them work up to it, because most of the guys we work with, they have pretty sedentary lifestyles, right? So I say start at 7K a day, 7,000 steps a day. And then next week, once you've hit 7,000 a day every day, then it's like, let's go to 8. Then once you've hit 8, let's go to 9. Then once you've hit 9, let's go to 10. And then that's usually where I have people stay, right? 10,000 steps a day is the goal. It's not a magic number, but it does seem to be this step count daily where you get yourself into that moderately active zone, which means that you have more breathing room in terms of your daily calorie intake, right? Because if you think about what we're doing here, there's a couple ways to lose weight. You can do no exercise at all and just starve yourself and achieve that calorie deficit just from eating less. You could do that, but that's pretty miserable existence, and you probably won't be able to eat a ton of food. So you could sit on your ass all day and just not eat anything. That's one way. The second way is you can eat a ton of food. You can eat more food, but you have to achieve your entire calorie deficit from doing more exercise. That's also very exhausting. The third way, which I recommend, is you do both, right? So you eat less, meaning you moderate you cut back on the calories, you increase the protein, so you're here, but then you also help the process by getting more exercise in a reasonable way. So you kind of meet in this, you have this middle ground where you're eating less, you're eating more protein, you're lifting weights, you're building muscle, but you're also getting more active in a way that's repeatable every single day, getting more steps, and then boom, now you've achieved your deficit with a lot more ease, right? That's the way I would recommend doing this, okay? Now, side note too, in terms of like how to achieve that, like consistently do that calorie deficit with Asian food specifically. One of the things I found super valuable for me when I was getting started is I started taking inventory of what Asian foods fell into each of the macronutrient categories. Like what's a carb with Asian food? What's a protein and what's a fat? So a carb is gonna be something like rice, noodles, Japanese sweet potato, right? A protein source is going to be something like minced pork, chicken breast, sirloin, top round, brisket, ribeye, right? A fat source is going to be something like the oil, right? Sesame oil, or peanuts, or eggs, or even pork belly. Pork belly, like it's very high fat, right? Very calorie dense. And so once you start categorizing these things and you start to understand how can I assemble my meals to make sure that they are balanced, right? So remember how we talked earlier about that protein, carbs, veggies rule, right? So now you can start to see like, okay, how do I assemble each meal? And to keep it super simple, I would recommend the place you start with this is you just go, okay, I'm gonna have one carb source, one protein source, one veggie source for my meals, and maybe one fat source if I have room for it, right? Most animal meats you eat already have a little bit of fat in them, so you don't have to worry about that. But that's just a general idea, right? So now you start assembling these meals in a way that's repeatable, that's simple for you to prep, that doesn't take a ton of time, and now you're off to the races with how you're going to do this. Okay. So I forgot to mention that earlier, so that's why I kind of that's why I rewinded back to it. But I think the biggest thing is you have to take a proven concept of fat loss, which is macronutrients, counting calories, and then apply that to Asian food, right? How does Asian food fit into this? Because there's a lot of people say I think a lot of Asians believe too that the Asian food is just very unhealthy, that it's very greasy, and sometimes it is, right? For sure, most of the restaurant dishes that we see are they can be pretty calorie dense. They taste good, but they can be pretty calorie dense. But there is always different swaps you can make. Homemade stuff is very easy to make healthier and make lower calorie, make higher protein. And so you just have to be on the lookout. Most people don't even look for those things, so they don't find them. But if you look for them, then you can start being aware of this and start kind of, stacking the odds in your favor, right? So that's like the nutrition piece and the workout piece. But the last and final piece that I think so many guys sleep on, pun intended, is sleep and recovery. The difference that you will see in your results when you sleep 4 to 5 hours a night versus 6 hours a night versus 7 to 8 hours a night is massive. It's massive. When you don't get enough sleep consistently, your appetite goes up. Your appetite for the wrong foods goes up. For your appetite for, very high, sugary, carby, salty junk food goes up, and your metabolism is not optimized. And aside from that, you're not recovered. Your brain is not recovered, so you're going to perform worse at work. Your sort of, I guess you would call it, inhibitions for bad habits goes down, and so you'll be much more likely to give in to cravings and snacking and things like that. And it just makes everything harder to do. Your workouts will suffer as well, so you're not going to be able to build strength and recover and build your muscle back. So everything takes a hit when you don't sleep properly. And so if there's one sort of foundational habit I would recommend for all of you that it took me way too long to really, I guess, take as seriously as I should have, is prioritize your sleep. Make sure that you carve out that time where you don't encroach on your planned sleep time, where you really make an effort to get that 7 to 8 hours a night, and you protect that time like your life depends on it, because it does. Are you always going to be perfect? No. Sometimes I have to, sometimes I have to stay up late and do work as well. But as much as I possibly can, I always try to make an effort to get my at least 7.5 hours of sleep a night. It makes a huge difference, right? And I think the piece people don't realize too is that getting less sleep than you should can literally decrease your body's ability to burn fat by up to 55% just from one bad night of sleep. So your body's gonna it's literally gonna start holding on to as much body fat as it can because it's trying to conserve energy, right? So you gotta optimize this part to dial this thing. And to give you guys a couple tactics on this too that I've learned over the years, you want to go to bed cold, blind, deaf, and hungry. Cold, meaning keeping your room at least 68 degrees Fahrenheit or below, because your body does fall asleep a lot faster and a lot better when the room is cold, and it helps your sleep quality a ton. Blind, meaning your room should be as dark as possible, blackout curtains, eye mask if you need it, right? Minimal light coming in. Deaf, meaning no outside noises. So for me, I wear earplugs at night just because it's just a forced habit, but it really does make sure that I don't get woken up by any extra sound. Hungry, meaning you want to go to bed a little bit hungry if you can, right? Typically speaking, you want to stop eating your last bit of food around 2 to 3 hours before you plan to go to bed, just to give your body some time to digest it and not be in digestion mode when you're trying to go to sleep. All right. So if you do those things, and then the other huge part of sleep too is just having that consistent schedule where you have your set wake time and your set sleep time. Maintaining that structure there is going to make sure that your body falls into a natural rhythm with sleep, and that's going to help a ton as well. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, I think that's pretty much the entire process from start to finish. Obviously, like, I can go into more detail, and I will in other videos on this, but that's the process. So just if you see a ton of different information out there, you can really boil it down to a few key things, right? Do I know what my daily calorie and protein goal is based on my age, weight, height, activity level? Am I tracking my food? Do I know everything that I'm putting into my body, which means drinks, sauces, oils, protein, carbs, like everything? Am I tracking it accurately, meaning weighing out by grams, and using brand, using the specific names if I can? And do I have like a set meal structure that I'm following? It's not always going to be perfect, but you should aim for 80%, right? Meaning you have a breakfast, like 3 meals a day plus 1 snack to make sure you hit your daily calorie goal and your protein goal, right? Are you working out 3 times a week, lifting weights? Are you hitting your step count? And are you sleeping 7-8 hours a night? So that over the years, that's what I've assembled as like the few key things that actually matter. Meal timing, post-workout, pre-workout, none of that stuff matters. If you just nail these things down, you will be in a much better spot. So hopefully you found this helpful. And if you're watching this, if you're an Asian guy who's kind of looking for more one-on-one guidance and any sort of help to be able to break through, lose 20 to 40 pounds plus, and do it in a way that's sustainable without giving up your cultural foods, and you want help kind of designing a custom strategy around that, feel free to DM me the word Asian on Instagram. I'll link it below in the description. But if not, no pressure, all good. Hope you'd enjoy the video, and I'd be happy to chat with you guys soon. Talk to you soon. Have a good one.